Muito boa tarde, bem-vindos ao webinar de Assembleias Gerais no Mundo Digital. Em nome da AEM, tenho muito gosto em cumprimentar todos os presentes, naturalmente com uma saudação muito especial aos representantes das empresas associadas da AEM que aqui nos acompanham e agradeço a participação de todos. A sessão de hoje dá continuidade ao ciclo Encontros AEM que organizamos regularmente para discussão e análise de temas de relevante interesse prático para as empresas emitentes. Estes encontros são dirigidos às empresas associadas da AEM e aos seus representantes, mas igualmente abertos à comunidade do mercado de capitais e a um público especializado que acompanha de forma muito próxima a atividade da AEM, bem como os temas de mercado e a evolução da economia portuguesa e europeia. Relativamente ao tema sobre o qual incide a sessão de hoje, o contexto pandémico que temos vivido, o estado de emergência e as consequências medidas de isolamento social vieram alterar muito dos nossos procedimentos cotidianos, afetando igualmente os processos relativos à organização e realização das reuniões da Assembleia Geral. Estes aspectos têm merecido maior atenção por parte da AEM e é neste contexto que esta tarde a Moraes Leitão e Associados e a Proximity associam-se à AEM para uma reflexão sobre Assembleias Gerais no mundo digital, tema premente da vida das empresas. Contamos assim com a presença de Magda Viçoso, advogada e partner da Moraes Leitão, e Michael Kemp, Head of Business Development da Proximity, e Abel Sequeira Ferreira, membro da direção e diretor executivo da AEM. À Magda Viçoso e ao Michael Kemp e na sua pessoa às respectivas instituições, agradecemos a disponibilidade e a forma empenhada como de imediato aceitaram o nosso convite para participar nesta sessão e connosco discutir a evolução do quadro legal, as estratégias e soluções que as empresas podem considerar para melhor responder aos desafios colocados à organização das reuniões da Assembleia Geral. O Michael Kemp não partilha a nossa língua materna, mas muito simpaticamente facultou autonomia ao painel para que o tema seja abordado nos dois idiomas, pelo que as primeiras intervenções serão em português, seguindo-se a intervenção do Michael e debate em inglês. Por último, peço à audiência o favor de colocarem as questões que possam ter no chat Q&A para o efeito, para na parte final da sessão as mesmas serem endereçadas ao painel. Muito obrigada a todos e sem mais demoras passo a palavra à primeira intervenção desta tarde, Abel Sequeira Ferreira.
Obrigado, Matilde. Junto-me naturalmente à Matilde nas boas-vindas a todos, no agradecimento muito especial à Magda Viçoso e ao Michael Kemp. E vou apenas, de forma muito breve, contextualizar a razão pela qual nos pareceu oportuno realizar esta sessão dos encontros AEM. E para o efeito, vou compartilhar a tela para uma apresentação muito rápida. Bom, não é necessário recordar, porque todos o temos bem presente, que em 2020 o nosso mundo mudou, passámos a viver em circunstâncias absolutamente excepcionais, que mudaram praticamente todos os aspectos da nossa vida e também da vida das empresas. E natural e necessariamente essas mudanças e essas circunstâncias excepcionais afetaram também os aspectos relacionados com a realização das Assembleias Gerais, na medida em que as Assembleias Gerais, situação que não imaginaríamos uns meses ou semanas ou dias antes, transformaram-se elas próprias numa fonte de risco, na medida em que no seu método de organização tradicional, implicavam a permanência de um conjunto de pessoas no mesmo espaço físico, com os inerentes riscos de contágio. Nós na AEM passámos de imediato a acompanhar com a maior atenção os aspectos relativos à organização e realização das Assembleias Gerais, fizemos-lo designadamente procurando desde logo, junto do Governo, que os prazos para a realização das Assembleias Gerais pudessem ser alargados, o que veio a acontecer na altura através da publicação do Decreto-Lei 10/2020, que na nossa perspectiva foi publicado tão cedo quanto na altura era possível. E fruto do trabalho que temos mantido sempre de diálogo e cooperação com a CMVM e da abertura e da flexibilidade que a CMVM nesse momento também manifestou, muito atenta também às dificuldades que as empresas estariam a sentir, trabalhámos em conjunto no desenvolvimento de um conjunto de recomendações, a que também se associou o IPCG, no sentido de promover o mais amplo recurso à via telemática para a realização das Assembleias Gerais e, em termos gerais, para admitir, eu diria, quaisquer formas de realização das Assembleias Gerais e de participação nas Assembleias Gerais, desde que naturalmente aceites ou promovidas pelos presidentes da mesa das Assembleias e desde que, isso foi sempre uma condição sine qua non, devidamente publicitadas com antecedência razoável e nos estritos termos formais das convocatórias. Julgamos que tudo correu da melhor maneira em 2020 e a percepção que temos é que as coisas estão a correr relativamente bem também em 2021. O tema dos prazos para a realização das Assembleias Gerais voltou a estar em cima da mesa. Na nossa perspectiva, e insistimos nesse ponto, teria sido possível que o alargamento desse prazo tivesse acontecido mais cedo. Em 2020 fez sentido que acontecesse quando aconteceu. Em 2021, de facto, deveria ter acontecido mais cedo e procuramos diligenciar nesse sentido. Mantivemos também o diálogo com a CMVM e nas reuniões regulares que fazemos com o Departamento de Emitentes da CMVM, discutimos e revisitámos as recomendações e concluímos que, em princípio, não havia lugar à necessidade de alterações, ainda que num ou noutro caso pudesse existir a necessidade de ulteriores esclarecimentos que, entretanto, foram sendo prestados. E, portanto, convivemos hoje de forma pacífica com diferentes modelos de realização de Assembleias Gerais. Tenho aqui alguns números que ilustram isso mesmo. Os mais atentos repararão que estes números não são exatamente idênticos àqueles que a Magda Viçoso daqui a pouco também vai apresentar. A razão de ser é que estamos a olhar aqui para um universo diferente, referimos-nos apenas às empresas associadas da AEM, e estamos também a trabalhar aqui com um critério mais genérico e menos técnico e talvez menos preciso do que aquele que a Magda daqui a pouco vai utilizar. O ponto é que, e esse é que nos parece importante, é que de facto, tranquila e pacificamente estão a acontecer diferentes modelos de realização de Assembleias Gerais. E, portanto, aqui chegados, dir-se-ia que está tudo feito e que se calhar nem precisaríamos de estar aqui a conversar sobre o tema. Não é essa, contudo, a nossa perspectiva. Por um lado, porque nós temos também prosseguido, designadamente no âmbito da European Issuers, o acompanhamento das iniciativas que vão acontecendo a nível europeu e em cada um dos países congêneres, quer em relação ao tema do prolongamento do prazo para a realização das Assembleias Gerais, quer em relação ao tema da admissibilidade das Assembleias Gerais digitais, quer em relação a outros aspectos relevantes, como, por exemplo, o reporting em ESEF, que pode ter consequências também em termos de prazos de reporte, de informação, de disclosure e de realização das Assembleias Gerais. E, portanto, vamos percebendo nas conversas com os nossos colegas das outras associações que o tema não é considerado fechado em nenhum dos países e, em particular, e julgamos que é esse o ponto que faz sentido também colocar na nossa reflexão e discussão, e, em particular, encontramos-nos perante uma situação em que, desejavelmente, vai chegar um momento em que a pandemia ou terminará ou diminuirá a sua intensidade, em que voltaremos, julgo que não ao mundo que tínhamos anteriormente, mas a um mundo em que a presença e a permanência física esteja menos limitada e, portanto, é importante discutir neste momento o que é que vai acontecer no futuro. Por um lado, porque devemos preparar-nos para esse futuro e, por outro lado, porque eventualmente alguma maior flexibilidade com que temos contado e trabalhado nestes 2 anos poderá, entretanto, vir também a diminuir e novas questões e novos problemas e diferentes regras poderão vir a surgir. E, portanto, pareceu-nos que era muito importante contar com a presença da Magda Viçoso e do Michael Camp e com a grande experiência que ambos têm relativamente a estes temas para discutir, entre outros, aspectos como se estamos perante uma tendência temporária, ou perante algo que é verdadeiramente estrutural e de uma mudança que ficará de futuro, tentar perceber melhor os desafios tecnológicos e as questões técnicas com que nos temos defrontado, perceber até que ponto é que as práticas de corporate governance mudaram, se aquilo que já tínhamos era suficiente, se fomos pelo bom caminho quando tentámos ajudar a construir um enquadramento mais adequado e se precisamos ainda de afinar, complementar, refletir sobre as práticas que temos atualmente e, em geral, perceber se as perspectivas das empresas e as perspectivas dos investidores se encontram alinhadas relativamente a este tema e como é que podemos, se for o caso, melhorar aquilo que tem vindo a ser realizado e concretizado. E, portanto, o nosso objetivo na AEM é sempre o de incentivar e manter o diálogo relativamente aos temas de maior importância prática para as empresas emitentes e, em particular, para as empresas nossas associadas. É isso que estamos hoje aqui a fazer e para isso contamos, e eu mais uma vez agradeço, com a presença do Michael e da Magda, a quem vou desde já passar a palavra, depois de interromper o compartilhamento do meu ecrã. E, portanto, you have the floor and you have the screen.
Muito obrigada, Abel. Em primeiro lugar, um agradecimento à AEM, seja pela iniciativa, seja pelo amável convite dirigido à Moraes Leitão e, em particular, a mim própria para esta iniciativa. É com todo o gosto que aqui estou. Penso que a iniciativa tem um excelente momento. Teremos, por certo, muitas pessoas na audiência que estão neste momento ainda a preparar Assembleias Gerais. Algumas já terão completado Assembleias Gerais e terão, por certo, uma experiência particularmente enriquecedora para partilhar connosco, e outros estarão no processo pós-convocatória e, portanto, em contactos com investidores e aqui o Michael, por certo, também dará um input importante para todos. Eu iria também partilhar uma apresentação para facilitar o acompanhamento de todos. Desde logo, gostaria de começar por partilhar convosco uma ideia que tem sido comum ao longo de toda a pandemia. Esta pandemia parece que veio trazer temas que não são exatamente uma novidade, mas sim ser um acelerador de tendências. A digitalização é claramente uma dessas áreas. Ao longo da nossa vida pessoal, no espaço económico dos mais variados setores, a digitalização é uma das oportunidades e dos desafios com que nos deparamos, e na área do governo societário o mesmo se passava. Desde 2016, por exemplo, que ao nível da European Corporate Governance Conference...
Magda, peço desculpa por interromper, não estamos ainda a ver a apresentação.
Peço desculpa, eu estou a visualizá-la, mas vou voltar a tentar colocar. Já estão a ver agora?
Agora sim.
Ok, perfeito. Como eu estava a dizer, a pandemia também na área da digitalização veio trazer um acelerador. Como dizia há pouco, ao nível do European Corporate Governance, na sua conferência anual, já vinha sendo discutido desde 2016 qual era o papel da digitalização no governo societário. E a participação em Assembleia Geral era uma das áreas identificadas como uma prioridade, em que a digitalização representava uma oportunidade, por um lado, para as companhias terem um maior contacto e comunicação com investidores e que, da perspectiva dos investidores, seria também uma expectativa razoável que as Assembleias Gerais tivessem uma crescente intervenção através de meios digitais. Esta tendência, já em 2016, era clara no sentido que não deveria ser uma imposição, deveria ser uma oportunidade que mantivesse flexibilidade para as várias empresas e que permitisse que cada empresa escolhesse o melhor modelo de realização da sua Assembleia Geral, desde logo em função da sua estrutura acionista, desde logo em função da sua dimensão e dos custos associados ao modelo a seguir, mas começava a tendência de que o exercício dos direitos dos acionistas em sede da Assembleia Geral, e em particular por parte dos acionistas institucionais, clamava por uma maior referência a métodos digitais. Entre nós, as vias telemáticas para a realização das Assembleias Gerais estão no Código das Sociedades desde 2006 e vinham sendo letra morta, mas efetivamente a pandemia abriu a oportunidade para todos pensarmos sobre as várias possibilidades de realização de uma Assembleia Geral e, para além da típica Assembleia tradicional e presencial, ponderar as vantagens e as desvantagens e também os riscos associados à realização de reuniões ou mistas, em que é dada a oportunidade aos acionistas de participarem presencialmente ou através de meios digitais, ou exclusivamente através das chamadas Assembleias Gerais virtuais. Os desafios e os requisitos inerentes, vamos ter a oportunidade, com certeza, de falar com eles hoje em algum detalhe, no painel que se segue, mas aqueles que são claramente os mais relevantes são, desde logo, a clareza da informação para os investidores, para os acionistas. Não havendo uma proibição estatutária, as Assembleias podem realizar assembleias recorrendo a meios telemáticos, devem ter nas suas convocatórias uma informação muito clara sobre o modo de realização e os procedimentos a seguir pelos acionistas para efeitos da sua participação. Não será aqui que se coloca o maior desafio. O maior desafio colocou-se em encontrar meios operacionais que permitissem cumprir os requisitos de autenticidade e de segurança, assim como as exigências de registro da participação e das intervenções em Assembleia Geral, também tendo sempre a certeza do compliance com as regras de proteção de dados pessoais, que são uma preocupação de todos, sendo cada vez mais um universo bastante restrito de regras e com sanções que podem ser significativas. Dentro desta lógica, o objetivo será conseguir dar os direitos de participação, representação e voto que numa Assembleia presencial qualquer acionista poderia ter, através de meios digitais que consigam reproduzir, resemble, exatamente o mesmo ambiente de participação e discussão que existiria no contexto de uma reunião em que as pessoas se encontrassem presencialmente. Outro dos desafios também aqui, dos requisitos a ter em conta, é assegurar processos de confidencialidade em termos de escrutínio de voto e de contabilização de quórums de voto que permitam, ao longo da reunião, controlar as entradas e as saídas que numa reunião presencial mais facilmente podem ser controladas do que numa reunião digital, mas que também encontraremos por certo, e temos vindo a encontrar na experiência recente soluções para o efeito. No caso das sociedades cotadas, estes requisitos têm a especial exigência, sobretudo, de o assegurar, mantendo o tratamento igualitário de todos os acionistas. E este é um ponto especialmente relevante, eu penso, no pós-pandemia, porque no pós-pandemia a realização de Assembleias Gerais com tratamento igualitário gerará a discussão se a pura Assembleia virtual permite um tratamento igualitário, por exemplo, em sociedades que tenham uma base acionista com acionistas de retalho num número muito significativo e com um grau de sofisticação menor, assim como o inverso se passará se depois da pandemia os investidores institucionais com maior grau de adesão a modelos digitais quererão voltar às tradicionais Assembleias Gerais presenciais ou exigirão, entre aspas, às empresas regressar a um meio termo em que se tem um regresso ao presencial somado com uma componente digital. Como o Abel referiu há pouco, a CMVM, o IPCG e a AM tiveram uma iniciativa que trouxe um especial conforto no momento em que a pandemia se iniciou, há um bocadinho mais de um ano atrás, vindo clarificar quais eram as fronteiras para assegurar o recurso pleno a Assembleias Gerais Telemáticas ou a possibilidade de conjugação de meios presenciais com não presenciais. E eu gostaria aqui de destacar, sobretudo, 4 ideias. A primeira ideia, a relevância que foi dada à transparência e informação para os acionistas, o modelo a seguir, a forma de participação, os requisitos de participação são essenciais, são elementos essenciais a sua clareza no âmbito das convocatórias. Em segundo lugar, destacaria a relevância dada a processos de autenticação e de registro que permitam total fiabilidade na identificação dos acionistas e da sua presença na Assembleia e do tracking de toda a sua presença ao longo de Assembleias, sobretudo nas situações em que haja a possibilidade de exercício do direito de voto na própria Assembleia. Em terceiro lugar, um aspecto muito relevante, que é o da interatividade. As Assembleias Gerais digitais não se pretendem Assembleias Gerais de apresentação pela empresa dos pontos da ordem de trabalho, pretendem-se fóruns de discussão, em que o acionista tenha acesso à informação, possa fazer questões, haja um diálogo interativo e, na minha visão, em que seja possível que desse diálogo se extraiam conclusões em termos do exercício do direito de voto ou através da possibilidade da sua alteração, no caso de um voto emitido previamente, ou através do próprio exercício do direito de voto na própria Assembleia Geral. Por último, também dar a nota de que neste momento de pandemia foi reconhecida a possibilidade de conjugação do voto por correspondência com o acompanhamento de Assembleias Gerais à distância como uma forma equilibrada de permitir o exercício dos direitos dos acionistas em sede da Assembleia Geral. Fora de um contexto de pandemia, eu penso que teremos que ser mais exigentes sobre o que é que significa interatividade numa Assembleia Geral virtual e podemos ter um maior risco associado em virtude de haverem, primeiro, uma experiência acumulada de alguns anos, segundo, a possibilidade de ter tempo para gerir meios operacionais e colocar meios operacionais à disposição dos acionistas, permitindo-lhes um exercício efetivo de direitos na própria Assembleia. Por último, uma nota também no nosso quadro legal, mas numa componente quadro regulatório, recomendações do Código do IPCG, desde o Código de 2018, que é clara a importância dada ao envolvimento dos acionistas no governo societário. A participação em Assembleia Geral tem ganho uma dignidade crescente da perspectiva das boas práticas de governo e em função da dimensão e da estrutura acionista das sociedades, tem sido visto que o exercício do direito de voto à distância ou a participação dos acionistas na vida da sociedade, pelo menos no momento anual da Assembleia Geral Anual, devem ser fomentados, devem ser incentivados, e esse espaço de comunicação contribui para o bom governance da sociedade, numa lógica de darem o seu contributo à administração para o futuro da companhia. Passando do quadro legal para a prática recente e procurando não vos tomar muito tempo, porque acho mais interessante em seguida termos um painel de perguntas e respostas e alguma discussão, não queria deixar de trazer aqui uma imagem de qual é que tem sido a prática recente. Vou começar não por um momento recente, por 2018, por vermos o quão rápido as coisas evoluíram e foram aceleradas em virtude da pandemia. Efetivamente, em 2018, a Comissão Europeia pediu à Ernst & Young a elaboração de um relatório sobre a utilização de ferramentas digitais na interação entre as sociedades e os seus acionistas. Este relatório vai para além da componente das Assembleias Gerais, teria outros tópicos, mas cobre especificamente a componente das Assembleias Gerais. E os dois pontos relevantes são, por um lado, assembleias totalmente virtuais eram absolutamente raras. Mesmo o webcasting de assembleias era muito pouco frequente e visto como um custo, o que é algo completamente diferente do mundo em que estamos hoje. Este estudo é um estudo que olhou para 10 Estados-membros da União Europeia, portanto não é um estudo para Portugal especificamente, mas permite dar uma comparação interessante ao momento que vivemos hoje. E as razões pelas quais, na altura, se identificou das entrevistas tidas neste estudo que não havia uma evolução e não havia uma adoção efetiva de ferramentas digitais nas Assembleias Gerais, eram essencialmente de 3 ordens. Tínhamos fatores culturais, a importância da Assembleia Geral ser um momento de face-to-face accountability, em que há um aperto de mão, em que as pessoas se veem face a face e não um momento desligado e distante. E, portanto, era um verdadeiro tema de hábitos de trabalho e de hábitos sociais. A segunda razão para esse impedimento da utilização de ferramentas digitais pretendia sobretudo com aspectos jurídicos. Várias jurisdições na União Europeia não tinham um regime tão claro como o nosso e mesmo entre nós havia alguma incerteza jurídica quanto à utilização destas ferramentas digitais. E, em terceiro lugar, também aspectos operacionais. As empresas tinham renitência de terem e receio de terem uma perda de controle do que acontecia na Assembleia Geral e não terem suficientes mecanismos ou plataformas informáticas que lhe dessem conforto e que fossem um custo que justificasse fazer a Assembleia Geral. Portanto, não havia um incentivo da perspectiva operacional. Aquilo que se verificou, por exemplo, em 2021, foi uma realidade totalmente diferente. Só em Portugal, olhando para o espectro das empresas emitentes com ações cotadas, quer em mercado regulamentado, quer em mercado não regulamentado, que até 23 de abril tinham divulgado as suas convocatórias para a Assembleia Geral de 2021, que é um universo de 19 entidades, tivemos 5 reuniões presenciais a serem convocadas, 14 reuniões telemáticas, exclusivamente por meios telemáticos. Nenhuma destas empresas com sede em Portugal e com ações cotadas no mercado português e, portanto, aplicam as regras previstas no Código das Sociedades Comerciais, optaram por reuniões mistas. Dentro deste universo, olhando apenas para as Assembleias Gerais por meios telemáticos, 3 emitentes optaram por um modelo de voto prévio, sem possibilidade de alteração de voto em Assembleia Geral. 5 empresas optaram por modelo de voto prévio com possibilidade de alteração de voto em Assembleia Geral e 6, portanto o universo mais alargado, optaram por Assembleias Gerais com voto prévio e a possibilidade de voto em Assembleia Geral. Portanto, não seria obrigatório o exercício de um voto prévio para poder votar em Assembleia Geral. É essencialmente esta a diferença face às 5 entidades que se encontram na outra situação que acabei de descrever. Destas temos empresas que usam as nossas ferramentas de trabalho do dia a dia, Teams, Google Meet, passa publicidade, mas esta passou a ser a nossa realidade de todos os dias, e 2 empresas que usaram plataformas informáticas de votação eletrónica pensadas, desenhadas especificamente para assembleias gerais. Foi esta a experiência até aqui do ano de 2021. Com esta experiência, quais são os principais desafios de ter uma Assembleia Geral digital? Na minha opinião, a chave do sucesso de ter uma Assembleia totalmente digital é procurar ter o que chamaria uma live meeting. Isto significa que há um conjunto de características típicas de qualquer reunião que se conseguem reproduzir, seja presencialmente, seja à distância, e que hoje em dia temos ferramentas que nos permitem fazê-lo na sua plenitude à distância. O que não quer dizer que esse seja o modelo certo para todas as empresas. Da minha perspectiva, o primeiro ponto a ponderar na escolha do modelo de uma Assembleia Geral é olhar para a estrutura acionista da empresa e olhar para a agenda concreta daquela Assembleia Geral. Há modelos que, da minha perspectiva, têm um maior risco de litigância e que me parece que as empresas não devem adotá-los face à importância dos temas que muitas vezes colocam na agenda das Assembleias Gerais, e há determinadas matérias em que não devem correr o risco de, perante uma estrutura acionista, por exemplo, dispersa, não criar a oportunidade para os acionistas, de forma igualitária, terem uma real oportunidade de participação e voto em Assembleia Geral. No caso de optarem por uma Assembleia Geral digital, o passo seguinte, na minha opinião, é a escolha da solução tecnológica certa. Aquilo que é uma escolha de Teams pode funcionar para uma empresa em que vão aparecer na Assembleia um universo bastante reduzido de participantes. Os modelos de plataformas de voto eletrónico permitem uma participação em Assembleia substancialmente mais alargada e foram desenhados e pensados especificamente para Assembleias Gerais, o que, portanto, diminui o risco na organização do evento. O terceiro tema que acho especialmente importante é a clareza nos materiais para as Assembleias Gerais. As nossas convocatórias tendem a ser documentos especialmente pesados, que foram pensados com uma estrutura e para um momento da vida das sociedades que é um momento muito diferente daquele que vivemos hoje. Se olharmos para convocatórias noutras jurisdições, há uma preocupação delas serem especialmente investor-friendly, materiais apelativos para o investidor que lhe permitam incentivar a participação e perceber claramente a forma de participação, o que acaba por ter vantagens para a própria companhia, porque a experiência que muitas vezes acontece é que, não obstante ter uma convocatória muito completa, os investidores inundam as sociedades com perguntas e os intermediários financeiros sobre como participar, qual é o prazo, tenho que mandar assinatura reconhecida, não tenho que mandar. Estas practicalities podem ser muito simplificadas com materiais divulgados de forma relativamente simples e standardizada. O quarto ponto, na minha opinião, de especial relevância e um desafio a ter em conta na realização das Assembleias Gerais com recurso a meios digitais, em termos de certeza jurídica, prende-se com a clara existência de mecanismos de autenticação e de mecanismos de controlo do voto que permitam às sociedades ter uma identificação precisa dos investidores, que tomam naquele momento são acionistas, que aquele investidor que concretizou-se que era acionista quer participar e que conseguimos, através de métodos relativamente simples, assegurar um processo de autenticação e assegurar que ele se inscreve numa plataforma disponibilizada pela sociedade, ou que ele tem um contacto com a Secretaria-Geral de uma sociedade que permite assegurar a autenticidade de toda a documentação daquele acionista e que permite fazer um track record através de credenciais, de passwords, que vão servir como forma de controlo ao longo de própria reunião da Assembleia Geral, seja da possibilidade de intervenção, seja da possibilidade de exercício de direito de voto na Assembleia. Hoje já criámos uma experiência que nos permite controlar com segurança e certeza jurídica registro de quem participou, registro de que quem participou estava devidamente autenticado, e estes processos, que provaram provavelmente ser mais simples alguns do que estávamos à espera, já começam a estar relativamente testados. No pós-pandemia, provavelmente vão ter a dificuldade de, se quisermos ter assembleias mistas, agravar o desafio de ter que adicionar e combinar estes métodos de autenticação, participação e discussão, com pessoas presentes no mesmo espaço físico e pessoas presentes através de métodos digitais, que penso que é um passo seguinte e um desafio seguinte que a maioria das empresas ainda não deu. Portanto, assim terminava, Abel, e passava a palavra para o Michael e para si.
Muito obrigado, Magda. Michael, thank you very much for bearing with us in Portuguese for the last 40 minutes. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much indeed. And my apologies entirely for speaking in English. My Portuguese just really isn't quite up to it, I'm afraid, but I hope English is okay for everyone. What I wanted to talk about today is obviously something that impacts all of us. And we've seen across our industry over the years, various different catalysts that have driven change in our financial industries that impact issuers and investors alike, whether that's the creation of CSDs and then international CSDs, whether that be electronic exchanges, whether that be governance codes, Giovannini when I first worked with Abel, all other things. And at the moment, we're in the unique situation where we're going through three major changes all at the same time, which changes the way particularly investors are behaving and will lead to pressure on issuers and countries and governments to behave as well. So the first of those that Magda was already talking about was obviously COVID. We know that that's driven a change towards virtual and hybrid meetings. One provider alone of those kind of systems were telling me that 3 years ago they did no virtual meetings around the world. Last year they did over 3,000, and this year they're expecting to do 4,000 to 5,000 virtual meetings for issuers globally. So we can see how COVID is making a big impact in terms of the behaviours and jumped us forward in terms of behaviours. I think that move to virtual or hybrid meetings probably would have taken us 5 to 10 years without COVID, but obviously has happened over 6 to 12 months. And we've seen across Europe, different governments and different markets behaving very differently. My own government, the UK government, has been nothing short of appalling in their reaction around governance and the way they've reacted to COVID, leading to a lot of closed door meetings where shareholders and investors as a whole have been very disenfranchised and very disappointed about how they can engage with their issuers and how they can engage on the voting side of things. So that's one big change. The second big change is that we are moving from the industrial society to something called the network or the digital society. So I'm old enough to have learned in school, and maybe some others did too, all about how we moved from the agricultural to the industrial society. And now we're going through the next big change. And how that's translating itself to us is we're seeing far more shareholders from overseas. We're seeing an expectation that information from companies is digital. We're seeing expectations that wherever people are in the world, they can attend meetings, they can vote prior to the meeting, appoint proxies, all of those kind of things, or indeed engage regularly with issuers as they move forward. We see that in other industries as well. We see things like the travel industry where Airbnb is a disruptor that has been caused by this move from industrial with lots of intermediaries to digital, where the person lending out their flat to the person wanting to borrow their flat are engaged, do it all digitally, and cutting out those travel agents or those middle providers that we've seen on the internet. And of course, the third big change is within our industry as well, which is the shareholder rights regulation. We all know that the Shareholder Rights Directive 2 is in. Obviously, it's been enshrined in laws across Europe, sometimes slightly differently, which is disappointing, but sometimes in a very standard way. And that is leading to a series of expectations from shareholders around how companies, how markets, how themselves should behave. And they are all looking at information, transparency, speed of information, the ability to take part in things remotely, and understand that the account of informations. On the other side of things, it's creating a change in disclosure rules where 3 or 4 years ago, it was very difficult for a lot of companies and a lot of issuers around Europe to understand who their shareholders or beneficial holders actually were. And the SRD2 allows us to speed that up very, very quickly and allow that engagement between issuer and their owner in a way that we haven't before. And we'll talk throughout the presentation about how that's impacting people. Of course, it's not just rules that hit issuers at this point. It's also on the investors and their stewards. And what we've seen again across Europe as a whole is that SRD2 has created an obligation on investors to do 3 main things. Firstly, publish an engagement policy to their underlying stakeholders. Secondly, prove and report yearly how they've engaged and how they voted at company meetings and with companies. And they now have an obligation to tell their stakeholders within that investor pool how they have behaved. So they will be reporting that they have voted, they have engaged with you. And of course, to do that, they need an effective way to vote and a confirmation that it has happened. And thirdly, they must announce and say what their investment strategy will be and how they have implemented it. So they will be looking at the behaviors across environmental, social, and governance factors as a whole and determine whether they will make investments in certain companies over other companies. And we're seeing more and more institutional investors be very, very clear about the types of organizations they will invest in, whether that's to do with CO2 emissions, when it's the oil and gas industry or the travel industry, whether it's diversity, in terms of the social side of things, or whether it's good governance in terms of how company meetings are run and those kind of things. And behind that, we're seeing the stakeholders, the actual underlying beneficial owners, really putting a lot of pressure on institutional investors on 4 or 5 key elements. The first being environmental, social, and governance, as I've just mentioned. The second is to move away from short-term strategies into long-term strategies, so that short-termist, profit maximizing, revenue maximizing behavior that we've seen from institutional investors in the past is beginning to come down a little bit, and we're seeing much more long-termism coming in. That'll be a slow one in my personal opinion, but it's happening. We are seeing that those stakeholders are asking for greater engagement with companies, not just once a year at the annual general meeting, but throughout the year to make sure there is proper engagement and proper communication and transparency. And really importantly, and the reason I've highlighted the 2 at the end, is have they voted? How have they voted? And did they attend the meeting? And if they did attend the meeting, what types of questions did they ask? What were the answers given? And everything else. So throughout the chain, we're seeing these 3 catalysts create a series of impacts that I think are really important as we move forward across Europe and across the world in terms of how we behave at meetings, both from the investor side and of course from the issuer side. And what we're seeing is that investors are now looking for 6 or 7 different things that they really want to get that they would call good governance. And I've put little ticks and crosses related to Portuguese market purse, but pretty much what we're seeing across Europe as a whole. They're really looking for very fast notification of information, whether that be the information that a company meeting is about to happen, whether that's the annual report, whether that's a director has resigned or is due to be appointed, or all of those kind of things. And not enough for them globally to be able to say, it takes me 2 or 3 days to get that information. It's now that it needs to get to their desks almost immediately. And we're seeing a number of processes and procedures in different markets that are allowing issuers to announce a meeting and have their end beneficial holders have that information in real time. A bit like Airbnb again, where a flat holder or property holder can put an advert for their flat to say it's available, and all the people who want to see that see it in real time. It's the same with general meetings, and this historic way that we've seen in markets like Belgium or France or Germany, where meeting announcements go into a journal and it takes days and days and days, sometimes up to 10 days for that meeting announcement to get to an investor, simply isn't acceptable anymore across Europe. At the other end of the scale, we're seeing them really want to have the market deadline for voting. So as we know, investors go through a number of different intermediaries, whether that be a sub-custodian, whether that be a global custodian, and we're seeing chains of up to 9 or 10 different layers of ownership. And each one of those adds a different deadline on. So sometimes where you've got a company meeting on a Friday, it's actually the Friday before or even before that the end investor is receiving as a deadline to cast their vote or give their intention for how they want to attend the meeting. And of course, that's very inefficient, and it doesn't give them enough time to make the right stewardship decisions. So at both ends of the company meeting, we're seeing we want information earlier and we want to be able to vote later. But really importantly, we are beginning to see in the markets that have made some changes, instructions and votes coming in much earlier from investors. Why? Because they want issuers to understand how they are feeling before the company meeting. So we're seeing in some markets, issuers are receiving votes 5, 6, 7 days earlier than they did in the past, which obviously gives a very good ability for an investor and issuer to engage, should that investor have said, I'm going to vote against whatever resolution it is. I won't go through all of these, but the other one I wanted to point out is that harmonized, efficient, and digital process, which is the second to last box. Because of the digital society, because we are seeing investors invest in multiple markets around the world, they want simple processes, they want to be able to vote, they want to know how to vote without a great deal of effort. And that is something that is becoming a recurring theme in different markets. And I'm sure in the questions at the end, we can talk a little bit about the differences in different markets as we go forward, but it is really important. And in all markets, we're seeing some challenges and we're seeing some really good things. We're seeing some really difficult things, and Portugal is no exception. And when I talk to the investors who we work on behalf of, and again, I can talk a little bit about what Proximity does later if people are interested, but I wanted this to be more about the voting process, is we are seeing some challenges within the Portuguese market that people are calling out and asking for change, and perhaps it's something we can talk about. And it's not just at the meeting, it's pre the meeting, it's the announcement process, it's the amount of paper, and it's throughout the year that they're calling out. None of these, I think, are particularly difficult to overcome, but they are probably things that as a community we've never talked about before. And again, these drivers of COVID, digital society, and also the SRD2 has highlighted and put spotlights on some of the challenges we are seeing in different markets as people are trying to standardize and harmonize their processing. So without calling these out, because this is meant to be a constructive debate and just really to highlight a few things. But what we're seeing is that in some cases, particularly in Portugal, the meeting announcements are fantastic. It's really clear. In other cases, intermediaries are probably bugging all of you, calling you up, asking you questions because they don't understand what the process is or what they need to do, but they are really, really keen to vote and their stakeholders are asking them to vote. We are seeing a lot of differences between the different issuers in Portugal, some allowing for or wanting electronic keys to process to allow people to vote at the meeting. Some are asking for specific powers of attorney or chains of a power of attorney. Some aren't. Some are asking for declarations around beneficial owners. Some are, some aren't. And on the custodian and intermediary side, I know, because we process for a number of custodians, they are interpreting those rules differently. So I suspect there's inefficiency on the investor side as well, saying we are probably sending you the wrong things, which is not good for governance. I know that in Portugal, tax ID is, in theory, a regulation. So far this season, only one issuer has actually enforced the use of tax ID. So again, we're getting different approaches behind that. And we're getting multiple processes at different dates, whether that be the pre-registration, the record date, the market deadline, the post-record date. And there's a lot of manual work, which I'm sure is manual for everyone on this call, but it's also manual for the market. And what we're seeing is that votes in some markets take a few hours. In other markets, they take 1 or 2 days. Typically in Portugal, to process the vote, it's taking investors between 1 and 3 days, and in some cases 4 or 5 days to vote in the Portuguese structure. And it's really highly manual and time consuming, and I'm sure, as I say, both for the company but also for the investor. Part of the question for that, of course, is does it matter? And I think it does, because ultimately investors and issuers probably want the same thing. We all want to have fast, efficient communication where we can talk to each other throughout the year. Issuers want to build up a picture of the voting consensus before the meeting date, so there are no surprises on the day, can engage with investors prior to the meeting should there be some kind of negativity, or indeed test the water earlier in the year. And investors want the same thing. That's all about the transparency of knowing who your institutional investors are, which traditionally has been very difficult, but SRD2 is helping enormously behind that, and also some of the systems that are out there now, and making sure we can connect issuer to investor. Do those investors have all the information they need to make the votes and go from there? And the answer is, not really. And that's part and parcel of the previous slide and what we wanted to talk about. Do we engage properly? Is the voting process as efficient as it can be to make it easy for the company to know how people are voting, easy for the investor to be able to vote? Is it paper-based, as we always used to do? In 2021, is that the right approach, given what's happened with COVID, with offices closed, mail probably unreliable, PDFs and all of those kind of things that some governments, and I know the Portuguese government has done a lot of work in this area, but other governments haven't done that. Obviously the meeting attendance, how many institutions actually attend across Europe, and it varies. Should they attend? Do we want our investors at the meeting? And of course, as I said before, the stakeholders are asking for the investors to do that. So it is quite a complex picture. And I think what I really wanted to get everyone's view of here today is partly to set out the issues that we're seeing and the drivers from the institutional investors, but also to think ahead and say, how do we now change? How do we now move forward? And I think there are things. We don't worry about it. We say, that's okay. We know it's not great, but it doesn't really impact everyone, and we're not really that worried. My personal view is that would be a mistake, because I think that would impact the perception of certain markets, of which Portugal might be one. The second is we work together as we often do in the markets when we see a catalyst or a change, and as Magda and Abel were just talking about, to say, how do we at least harmonize the process so that issuers and investors are doing the same thing, whether that's the custodian side and the institutional investor side to behave in the same way so that issuers can see how it's happening, but also from the issuer side to say, this is how we're going to announce meetings, this is how you're going to be able to vote, this is how you're going to be able to attend meetings, this is how we're going to publish the results. And that shouldn't be a very difficult process to do, because we can have that upward harmonization to the highest standard. And there's some really, really good examples of that in all markets. And then the third option is actually we embrace the change that the digital society is bringing us. We embrace what COVID has allowed us to do. And we need to look at the positives. I mean, COVID's been horrendous around the world. And I look what's happening in India and other places at the moment, and it's heartbreaking. On the other side, when we look at it from a business perspective, and just to that very narrow sort of moral lens, is would we have got through COVID 5-10 years ago without, as Magda was saying, Teams or Zoom or these kind of conversations? And the answer is it would have been a lot more difficult. So that digital society development we've had has given us real opportunities to do things in different ways. And perhaps the third option is, alongside number two, we work together to say, how do we change our markets? How do we make this more harmonized and effective across Europe? How do we embrace those digital elements, whether that be at the announcement, at the voting stage or appointing proxy stage, or at the meeting stage? And of course, my personal belief, and I wouldn't be here, but I have to sort of, my marketing guys will tell me off if I don't put a picture of proximity up there. We can really help with that. We'd love to help with that, but obviously that's a choice for the Portuguese market. And the sort of diagram on the left-hand side is how we are working in some other markets to allow that engagement between the issuer and in the end investor, and embracing all of those kind of things I talked about. So that's really what I wanted to say today. I'll hand back to you now, Abel, but hopefully, I've set out really the challenges, the changes, what investors want, and potentially a discussion for all of us as we move forward. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Magda and Michael, for two truly excellent presentations, which I believe not only gave us a lot of food for thought, but also were excellent in presenting both challenges and very helpful information for us to go forward. We already have some questions. I would like to remind our audience that questions can be presented through the Q&A at the chat of Zoom. But anyway, we have some questions that allow us to progress with our discussion. I will start with you, Magda. And the question is, now with the benefit of listening also to Michael, if you, Magda, see any particular new or increased risks for companies as a result of this shifting from in-person to virtual only shareholder meetings?
I believe that the trend will continue to be demanding opportunity to participate through electronic means. I believe shareholders will get used to only sending paperwork by email and not being required to send paperwork otherwise. They will get used to the option of linking through a webcast and assisting the meeting. I think it will be quite difficult to move back and say, forget, now we are doing all our meetings without webcast. For companies with dispersed share capital, with institutional investors in their shareholder structure, I believe that will no longer be an option. Shareholders will be demanding to have more visibility on what happens at the meeting. And additionally, in terms of the participation in the event, up to now, and in a context of COVID, having the possibility to vote in advance would seem sufficient in a context where we were not prepared in terms of operational means available, in a context where it's difficult to ensure legal certainty of having the possibility of amendment of the vote during the shareholders meeting for the future. After second rounds of annual shareholders meetings, I believe shareholders will be more demanding. And I think companies don't want to take the risk of having litigation for formal reasons. If they have hot topics on their agenda for a general meeting, or even if they don't have a hot topic, but the company is going through a more challenging moment, or even without that context, if they want to have an open opportunity for shareholders to participate and understand that as good governance in order to attract institutional investors to their shareholder structures. And this is a question of attractiveness of foreign investment and Portuguese investment to our shareholders bases, to the shareholders bases of our companies. Having alternatives to vote in the shareholders meetings is definitely something that will lead us in the next years, definitely. So I believe that the companies don't want to take the risk of going back, not learning from the opportunity they got from COVID to accelerate the digital trends. What we need to see is for each company, looking at its shareholder structure, looking at the costs, looking at the typical percentage of attendance in a general meeting, what is the best solution? What is the more balanced solution that allows shareholders to participate without that being a burden to the company on one side, but at the other side, giving the opportunity to attend and to vote in the meeting. Additionally, I would also make a point on the topic regarding materials and transparency. Definitely is an area where I believe we need to improve in Portugal. In recent period, we had an effort from our regulator in relation to non-financial information, for example. I think that is quite room for the future to have standards, good standards and good practices coming from regulators, coming from associations of issuers, coming from the associations of investors in relation to materials related to general shareholders meetings. Definitely is an area where I believe we can improve for the benefit of the company and for the benefit of the participation of shareholders. It will be an incentive to participate on one side, and on one side will obviously also contribute to reduce the risks associated with the digital meeting. Good information is the first step to minimize or reduce that litigation risk in a meeting using digital means.
Thank you very much, Magda. That was very clear. I agree that there is room for improvement, and we probably must do it through soft law, because we already have thousands and thousands and thousands of pages of hard law to comply and to study and to know. Michael, we know each other for almost 20 years. We have been discussing these matters in different roles and different capacities. With the benefit of that experience that you have, and because you mentioned SRD2, in your view, this new directive had some positive or some negative impacts. It's helping us, and I mean companies and issuers, going forward with these topics. It was the right directive to allow us to be resilient in a time of pandemics, and of course the European Commission was not able to guess that a pandemic situation was coming. But what's your view on that?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think depending on who you ask, you'll probably get a very different view about SRD2. I think generally, I think most people will say on balance, it's been positive. What it's definitely done is set the foundations for certain aspects, particularly around disclosure, where I think in a lot of markets that's been a real eye-opener for companies to be able to understand who their shareholders are, who's investing with them and engaging with them. And we're seeing in a number of markets, companies who really only knew who their shareholders were once a year at an AGM are now engaging much more with the various agencies who offer those services to find out who their shareholders are. There's probably a little bit of abuse of that power as well going on, if I'm honest, which is a negative, but it's definitely moving in the right direction. On the other side of that, the investors particularly, it's made them get their house in order. And there's been a lot of pain on the custodian side and the asset servicing side where they all felt they knew how to pass this information on, but clearly that's not been the case. And I won't name names, but we've seen some investors who've been able to say, yes, this is our underlying holders really easily. And we've had the downside of an email with 500,000 shareholders on it, with multiple repeats, probably breaking every GDPR rule under the sun, and various different things behind that. And we're just seeing some real pain. I think the foundations that SRD2 puts in place in terms of, as I say, transparency, in terms of setting the scene for digital, for, as Magda's saying, really creating that opportunity for shareholders and issuers to join up, to get confirmation of votes, and really importantly, to put obligations on the stewards themselves has been positive, but there's been pain also. So I'd probably say 80% positive, 20% pain, and there's probably an SRD3 coming down the track at some point, but let's not tell the European Union that just yet.
80-20 is always a good rule. I will probably say the inverse of what you said, but also applying 20-80 rule. Magda, from what I saw from your presentation regarding practical aspects, and Michael discussing about the needs of the investors is working with, I would say that companies and investors seem to be more or less aligned regarding the way forward for general meetings. Although, of course, the devil is always in the details. So in this current situation, and hoping that the pandemic situation will be solved, if not this year, the next year, do you believe that digital and hybrid meetings are here to stay in a post-COVID-19 landscape, or are we looking at some kind of temporary fashion of doing things?
First, I'm not as optimistic as Abel. I think this year and the next year will be years of uncertainty, which means that people will not be sure whether we will having a new vague, whether we are all coming to a conclusion that we will able to travel, we will be able to go to physical meetings. And in this field of uncertainty, I believe that the next year, most likely, the companies will want to avoid the risk of having meetings in presence with a lot of people in the same room. Having meetings that are in separate rooms or having hybrid meetings is even more challenging, because you have the double of the work. You have to sum up the operational means to have people in a room or to have different rooms, with the technological means and the platform that is able to put all these together. So I believe that hybrid meetings may happen, but in companies which really have a small number of attendance. So companies may say, you have an option to come in present, but if they feel that the attendance level will be low, if they feel that the attendance level will not be low, I think it will give much more room for risk and uncertainty, trying to mix both means. And definitely, as I was saying before, for the future, even without a pandemics, the impediments that I was talking about when I mentioned the study that Ernst & Young made, I think that with the pandemics, they have gone through the other way around. So now we are used, in terms of cultural and social habits, we are used to digital means. So that impediment, that obstacle, now works the other way around. I was in meetings of companies with shareholder spread among retail investors, with people from the North, Algarve, that most likely wouldn't happen if it was a presential meeting. And that shareholder, most likely next year, on following year, we say, why didn't I have the option now to have the possibility of at least having a webcast, or at least having a video conference allowing me to participate? So that obstacle, it will put pressure on companies to do it with digital means. Secondly, I think that for companies, if things move forward in this route, with the experience of 2 or 3 years, at least in some companies, they may come to the conclusion that is not as costly as they thought it would be. It much depends on how much solutions we may have in the future in the market to have voting platforms that allow the use of digital meetings. But if it comes from the companies and the investors, the willingness to have these platforms, 1.5 years before, no one used Teams or Zoom, and now we are all here together. So it will definitely be a trend, and I think the cost will reduce in terms of scale, not only in Portugal, but abroad, which means that it could be affordable for companies with a lower dimension and with a more concentrated shareholder base. So my understanding is that these digital means are here to stay. Our habits have changed. They give us room for opportunity. They call challenges that we need to address, but I think they are here to stay, and that's good thing of the pandemics. We had bad things. I think this is, in my opinion, a good thing.
Yeah, no, Bill, I would agree entirely. And I think we're seeing both retail investors, as Magda rightly said, whether they can travel or, whether they are spread around the globe, will expect to come now. That door's been opened. It's not going to be closed. But equally, the institutional investors are going to be expecting to be able to attend meetings wherever they go. And I think the cost one is a really interesting one. So we just did a case study with a FTSE 100 company in the UK. Now, admittedly, this was fully digital rather than a hybrid, so obviously with a pinch of salt, but they saved £250,000 on their AGM last year by running it by digital means rather than obviously as a physical means, because they didn't have the cost of the venue and all the catering and all of those kind of things. And their attendance went up from just over 200 to just over 500. So they know they can't go back now. So they've got to manage how they do this going forward. So it does depend on the size of the company and obviously the size of the venue that you've had in the past. But I totally agree with Magda. This is here to stay. We can't close this door again now.
Okay, so let me take a little bit of that experience that you have looking at what is going on in different countries and different jurisdictions. I understand the challenges you just referred to regarding the Portuguese market and the room for improvement that exists. And of course, we will address that internally and discuss it. But based on that experience that you have, what is your perception in comparative terms? How are we doing in Portugal regarding general meetings, comparing with other countries so present?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and it's a difficult one because there's so much history in that question, whether it was a bearer market originally, whether it was a registered market, how the governments have reacted to COVID, etc. So there are lots of different examples around Europe. So Austria, has gone through an approach where they're only allowing certain shareholders to attend meetings at the moment, but in its advantage, every company is doing the same thing. So investors know what's going on, and there's a level of harmonization, however painful it might be. Ireland has just moved from a relatively structured CSD environment to a nominee environment, and that's creating real problems in Ireland, where probably I would say Ireland has suddenly gone from a relatively efficient, no problem market to quite a complicated, difficult market overnight. But in terms of your question around Portugal, I would say the two markets that always come up as, dare I say, the most difficult markets across Europe to vote in, whether that's the paperwork and everything else associated with that or the meeting itself, are Germany and Portugal. So Germany has its real complications because it has registered shares, bearer shares, pre-registration, effectively blocking and those kind of things. And Portugal, because of the issues I put in the slide deck, is seen as difficult because everything is different. It's not that any one company is particularly difficult, it's because every company is doing slightly different things. So to answer your question, I would say Portugal is seen in the difficult end, and definitely I know that a number of institutions where governance is very, very important, it does impact their investment decision, whether they want to invest in Portuguese companies or not, which is not where we want to be, of course. So I'm really sorry, that's quite a difficult message to give, but you did ask the question. And I would say that's probably where Portugal is at the moment. Having said that, every country has its problems, every country has areas of improvement, but it's really the lack of harmonization that makes Portugal look more difficult than I think it probably is, if that makes sense. You're on mute, Abel.
I asked the question because I was expecting an answer along those lines, and I think that we really need to think a little bit about this and how to change that perception that we are aware is out there. We are perfectly in time. We still have 6 minutes, and we have a last question, which is for both of you, Magda and Michael. Maybe Magda can go first. And it's about what tips can you present to companies and shareholders in this digital world that apparently we all agree will remain during the next year, and then after, let's hope, in a post-COVID world. I'm happy, Magda, because you are the only person that is less optimistic than myself regarding the evolution of pandemics. So I finally find someone that is less optimistic than myself. So Magda, some tips for the end of our discussion.
Yeah. First of all, I will take the question. I will not run from the question, but I don't want to miss the opportunity to answer to Michael. I think that the Portuguese jurisdiction has something in our framework which is excellent, and we don't want to lose it. We have a very flexible regime since 2006 that we are prepared to do this type of digital or hybrid meetings. And I fully agree with Abel. We don't need more regulation to do it in the proper way. We have room with the regime that we have by now to have that opportunity to improve. So, and moving from these to tips. So,
by the way, I 100% agree, by the way.
Flexibility is the word, but there are two other critical words here. We need standards. I think in terms of disclosure, we have very different practices amongst companies, and it would favor this type of investors. They like standards, they like to tick boxes, and this is an area, disclosure and materials for the information, I'm repeating myself, I'm sorry, where I definitely think is a tip for the future, and it will allow us, without losing the flexibility that we have now in the Portuguese framework, to improve and to be able to be more prepared to address the concerns of the investors that may want to invest in Portugal or the shareholders of our companies. Second tip is definitely we need to test. The solution for this is doing testing and not giving big steps just by giving them. I think that companies need to start to think whether they are able, for example, to webcast. Instead of just saying, I'm going from a meeting in presence to a meeting fully digital, let's give some baby steps that are improvements that contribute to what investors are looking to, but I can do it in a solid way with comfort that I have control of what is happening. I will have no legal uncertainty in my meeting, and I will have procedures that I'm comfortable with. So definitely for companies that are only doing this type of meetings without webcasting, that is the first step. Definitely. A second step is, I think that shareholders in the future will quite demand the possibility to vote or either change the vote that they've given in advance in shareholders meetings. So I think that companies need to work in solutions that allows them to ensure that the people attending the meeting are able to have a different level of participation in the meeting. In that sense, I think that companies that are using, for example, just webcastings, they need to demand to their providers to have webcasted integrated with voting platforms, because until COVID, most of the solutions that were available in the market didn't combine these different streams. You had webcast solutions, webcasting platforms, video conferences, and it was all separated and not integrated. Definitely now is time to try to demand from providers having solutions that are able to integrate all these in order to have people participating not only through Q&As in advance of the meeting, not only through written Q&As, but also in voice discussing in the meetings. To have voting periods where you have certainty about the quorum that is in the meeting, because one of the most difficult things to control in a digital meeting is that people just go out, or because it's easy to go out and to do something different, or people just have a problem, for example, with their network and vanish for a few minutes. You need to have control around that to be sure that you have a voting process that allows you certainty. This is one of the reasons why part of the companies in Portugal are not actually ensuring live voting, because we don't have much solutions for this purpose until now. But I think definitely there is an opportunity there for platforms and software houses. So if the issuers demand for that and the investors demand for that, there definitely will be an improvement. So as I said, it's a question of testing the different solutions, test it in control, doing baby steps that progressively allow investors to have a deeper level of intervention in the meetings.
Yeah, and I would agree with everything that, and I think you're right, Magda, the flexibility the Portuguese market has is a real advantage to move forward. So you ask about tips, Abel, and I would say, embrace the change that's coming, because it's coming. We can't stop it, it's going to come, and we need to all adapt to that. And the biggest tip is to work together to decide where we want to get to and in what time period. And organizations like this one are essential to bring everyone together, because it's not feasible for every company secretary to work on this. So we need organizations like this to come together with the custodians, with our other issuer agents and people like that, to say, what do we want to do? Do we want to create a code of good governance around meetings or general engagement, whether that's the announcement, the actual meeting, anything else? And that's what we're seeing in other markets. And I couldn't agree with you more. Let's not do this by law change. Let's do this by working together, creating standardization, harmonization, and finding out what the objectives of both issuers and investors are to get to the right place. So that would be my biggest view, is to say, accept that the change is coming because it's here. We can't push that back, and work together to deliver the objectives that we all want to do, which is a really efficient process where there's good governance, both from the issuer perspective, but also from the investor perspective.
Michael, thank you very much for accepting our invitation and helping us thinking about these sometimes very complex and very technical matters. Magda, muitíssimo obrigado pela excelente apresentação e pela excelência das intervenções e pela oportunidade de continuarmos este diálogo sobre estes temas que também iniciamos já há quase 2 décadas em diferentes posições. Quero agradecer muito a todos os nossos participantes. Vamos continuar na AEM sempre que nos parecer oportuno a trazer-vos temas, enfim, que nem sempre são os mais confortáveis, e de facto esta sessão de hoje eu julgo que deixou bem presentes alguns desafios que temos de enfrentar e sobre os quais devemos refletir, mas vamos estar aqui sempre que oportuno e necessário a trazer-vos a reflexão e a discussão e a partilha de conhecimento sobre temas que nos parecem da maior importância para as sociedades cotadas. E, portanto, agradeço-vos muito a todos a presença, desejo-vos um ótimo final de dia e espero que tenhamos em breve a oportunidade de nos vermos, não apenas aos quadradinhos, mas de preferência também presencialmente. Até breve e muito obrigado a todos.